It's time for a preview of this year's Elite 11 showcase at 24/7 Sports. Keep up with our brand new YouTube page for updates regarding all things Elite 11 in 2022. And joining me now is Bud Elliott to preview all things Elite 11. And Bud, I want to start with this for a little bit of context. What is Elite 11? Why do we do this?
Hey, Colin. So Elite 11 is a competition. So it's a camp and a competition of all the best quarterback recruits in the country. There's a lot of the top private quarterback coaches at this event, a lot of guys who have played in the NFL, giving these dudes some tips and some pointers, but it's also a pretty fierce competition. They want to compete against each other. They want to see who is the best quarterback recruit in the country. It's a series of drills, both on the field and then also mental conditioning drills off the field. In the past, they've had these guys do some Navy SEAL style training on the beach. You do a lot of the virtual reality training as well. And then on the latter days, you go a little more 7-on-7, incorporating defense, making sure these guys can do reads. It's really quite a grueling challenge for these guys, but it's also a really fun experience, and that's why the participation at Elite 11, especially the finals, is always really good.
So now that we know what this is, why is this an important event on the recruiting calendar every year?
So it's a chance to go prove yourself. For us recruiting analysts, I think it can help you sort out. Seeing guys in person side by side is always valuable input when you're making your recruiting decisions and you're making your evaluations. For these kids, they get to go out there, they get to learn from the pros, they get to improve their game, and they want to compete. It's also a pretty prestigious honor if you make the final 11, thus the name Elite 11, or if you're named the Elite 11 MVP. We've seen past MVPs go on to be the number one pick. They've had a number of Elite 11 QBs do just that. Andrew Luck, Jameis Winston, to name a couple. And pretty much all of your quarterbacks in the NFL competed either at an Elite 11 finals or, in some cases, an Elite 11 regional.
So, Bud, as a loyal listener of the Cover 3 podcast, something you at home can see across the array of 24/7 Sports Facebook pages, I hear you talk about the Elite 11 a lot, but give me some of your favorite memories in covering this event.
Sure. So let's go back 4 or 5 years ago. I'm getting old, so this is definitely in the past. But Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. We'd known about Trevor Lawrence for a long time. He set records in the state of Georgia as a freshman, winning the state title. Everybody knew he was a stud. He comes out there, and another guy who's lesser known, more of a baseball prospect early on in his career, Justin Fields, who now is the quarterback of the Bears, went out there to the Elite 11 finals and the opening finals and put on a show. And those guys battling it out at Elite 11, it has to be my favorite memory, I think. Of course, you also have C.J. Stroud versus Bryce Young from a couple years ago. But anytime we have a loaded year like we do this year, I think the talent at this event is incredible this year. These guys they ball out. It's great, and it's just so much fun to watch.
It's a loaded year at the Elite 11, but this is a loaded show. Excellent stuff from Bud Elliott. We're about to head to the Pros Pro Brandon Huffman and another one in Greg Biggins as they preview the biggest recruiting storylines of this year's Elite 11.
Well, the Elite 11 is slated to kick off on Tuesday in Southern California, and there's no news bigger than the news that happened with Arch Manning, the number one prospect in the 2023 class, announcing his commitment to the University of Texas. Now, Greg, Arch won't even be in Southern California next week. He's the number one player in the country. Will his absence at the Elite 11 affect his ranking at all with all the other quarterbacks, especially in a very quarterback-heavy class, being in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I don't think it will, Huff. And, we had that call this past week where we discussed Arch. And what if somebody like a Malachi Nelson, a Dante Moore, a Nico Iamaleava comes out and just puts up a career week? Can they bump over Arch? I think the feeling right now is no. I think we feel good about Arch being number one still. Just the body of work. Again, Elite 11 is awesome. But again, it's rankings aren't based just on, an Elite 11 workout, any type of short workout, right? So it's your body of work. And I think Arch has kind of established himself as the guy. Now, obviously, again, I want to preface that by saying, what if one of these guys, you mentioned quarterback heavy, we have 3 other guys in our top 10 nationally. It's a great quarterback class. If somebody comes and just lights it up, Justin Fields kind of comes to mind. If someone else comes and lights it up, I think that deserves a conversation. But as of right now, unless someone has just a career workout, I think Arch will still be number one going into the senior season, and the next evaluation will be probably about 4 or 5 games into that senior season campaign.
Well, we even saw it a year ago when King Ewers was the number one ranked player in the country, came to the Elite 11, and it was another Texas quarterback, Cade Klubnik, who ended up being the Elite 11 Finals MVP, but Quinn Ewers held on to that number 1 spot until he enrolled a year early and reclassified. Now, Greg, you mentioned a couple of these names: Dante Moore, Nico Iamaleava, Malachi Nelson. All 3 of those guys are jostling for really the number 2 spot right now. But with those 3 guys, 2 of those guys are going to have a quick trip. Malachi Nelson coming from Los Alamitos, Nico coming from Long Beach, but Dante Moore is making the trip out from Michigan. Any of those 3 guys, or is there one of those 3 guys that you see maybe having such an impactful week, like you mentioned with Justin Fields earlier, that this week could be what, no pun intended, arches them in front of Arch Manning?
I think I'm on the table. I think it should. And I'll be honest. I don't think the rest of the group necessarily agreed with me, but I do feel like, say, a Dante Moore, right? Productive, state champion, put up ridiculous numbers. He's a winner. We saw him at the overtime event a couple of weeks ago, and he was unbelievable in terms of the arm strength. All his tools are projectable, right? The arm strength, the release, he was smart. Ball placement was on point. I love Dante Moore. I think Malachi Nelson might be the best pure thrower in terms of a ceiling. I think Nico Iamaleava, the Tennessee commit, I think he might have the highest ceiling in this group. He doesn't have the film the other 2 guys do in terms of experience. But I think all 3 of these guys are pretty special. Obviously, we have them in our top 5 to top 10. So if one of those guys comes and lights it up, I mean, I do feel like there should be that conversation. Should they be able to bump Arch? I think we should be able to at least have the conversation. But as of right now, I think my opinion is on deaf ears. But I do think all 3 of those guys. I think if one of them lights it up, why not? Let's have that conversation.
Player that I've been standing on the table for quite some time. He was excellent at the Elite 11 in Las Vegas. He was also really good at the overtime OT7 in Las Vegas. That's Jaden Rashada. Now, by the time he gets there on Tuesday, Jaden will have made his commitment. You can tune in on Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time to see Jaden announce his final choice here on CBS Sports HQ. But before then, we've been able to see Jaden really rise this spring. And it's not just because of his official visit schedule and all the schools making that late push for him. It's because of the ability that he had. You mentioned Nico doesn't have maybe the film of the experience that these other 3 guys have at quarterback, but Jaden may even have less experience and less opportunity to really shine. So this week could be big for him. What's your thoughts having seen Jaden a number of times this spring?
I mean, I'm with you, Huff. I think we're on the same page when it comes to Jaden. I think Jaden is an absolute dog, and I mean that in a good way. I think this guy has a chip on his shoulder. He's a NorCal guy, and NorCal guys always kind of feel like they get overlooked by the SoCal guys, and I think he's going to come out highly competitive. He was my number 1 guy in Vegas when we saw Eli Holstein and Pierce Clarkson and Malachi Nelson all locked in. I thought Jaden had the best day. I liked him at the overtime event last week again, where I mentioned Dante Moore, and that was coming off of 3 flights over a 7-day period. So I think he's a pure thrower. I mean, no one throws a prettier ball than he does. I think he's an underrated athlete. Again, I love the competitiveness that he has. I think he's a special talent. And to quote the great Brendan Huffman, I think he's closer to those top 3 or 4 than people want to give him credit for. So I think he does have a lot to gain. I think he's coming in, and I know the guy as well as you do, man. He's coming in, and he's going to want that number 1 spot after this coming week at the Elite 11.
We talked a little bit earlier about Cade Klubnik and the impression that he made last year at this event, but it's another Clemson commit coming into this event. Now, we've seen the Trevor Lawrence type guys that came into the Elite 11, committed to Clemson, and a Justin Fields passed them up. Maybe at that event, DJ didn't even go to the Elite 11 finals his senior year, Bryce Young, but that was really CJ Stroud's rise. But now you got a little bit of a Clemson quarterback kind of maybe down a little bit more off the radar in comparison to some of his predecessors that went to Clemson. Christopher Vizina is headed to Clemson, and he's a player that you and I both think could make a big rise next week as well.
So I don't want to say blown away. That's exaggerating a little too much, but I was highly impressed when I saw Chris at the Steve Clarkson retreat. And for those who don't know, the retreat it's a retreat, right? It's really lax, it's casual. But Chris was out there, man, and he was absolutely spinning the football. He was highly competitive in an environment that's not super highly competitive. And I was blown away, I will say, just by how well he threw the football. I know Cooper Patagna loved him at one of the Elite 11 regionals. And I made the comment after seeing him at the Clarkson retreat that I don't think he got enough fanfare for when he committed to Clemson. It was kind of like a ho-hum. It wasn't really creating that national buzz. But after seeing him up close, I think it should have created a lot of national buzz. I think the guy's got some special tools, man. He's again, I'll use the term I used with Jaden. He's a pure thrower. Ball comes out, really spins it. Big, strong kid, but he's got some mobility. Looked very comfortable inside, outside the pocket. And again, I felt like he had a little bit of a chip, and I love that in a quarterback. Not a cocky arrogance, but just a competitive. Hey, I'm as good as those guys. I think you have to have that. And I think Chris had that. So I think both him and Jaden can come up, and I think they're both going to have really big weeks.
A player that maybe doesn't get enough fanfare at all, partly because he plays in Nebraska. He's not in one of the big states for quarterbacks like a Texas, like a Florida, like a Georgia, like a California. And that's Zane Flores, who's committed to Oklahoma State. Now, if you've looked at one of the most consistent programs in the country over the last couple of years, it has been Oklahoma State. And this event always produces sleepers. Greg, you've been there since the very beginning of the Elite 11, and there have been guys that have come in with little fanfare. Maybe they came from smaller parts of the country. They didn't come from one of the big players. But Zane Flores is a guy that I'm really eager to see how he performs on this big stage. Coming out of Nebraska, he's a top 25 passer nationally. He's the number 2 prospect in the state of Nebraska, but he earned that invitation to Elite 11, to be able to have this opportunity to show that he's not just a regional guy, that maybe Mike Gundy should start to get more and more credit for the quarterback recruiting he's done and eyeing guys like this that maybe didn't come in with the press clippings that guys going to Oklahoma or Texas have in the last few years of the Big 12. Zane Flores is my pick for the sleeper, but you got another guy that you like who's kind of starting to see that same meteoric rise towards the end of spring as he heads into Los Angeles.
Yeah, no doubt. And one of the top uncommitted quarterbacks in the country, Ohio State just offered. They're pretty good at football, right? They do a pretty good job of developing guys. Auburn was on him pretty heavily. But no, just watching the film and watching some of his workouts, I'm like, this guy is legit. So I'm not really going out on a limb, by saying Brock Glenn, by the way, is his name. I don't know if I said that up front, but Brock, he's an 89. So if you're an 89, that 4-star, you're right there. So again, not a huge going out on a limb on my part saying he could get that 4-star bump. For me, he should be in that 4-star bubble. Watch some of his workouts last night. He's doing, a lot of those, I guess I'll call Mahomes throws, right? Where he's kind of rolling left and throwing the sidearm shortstop type stuff. And man, clean release. Again, I'm a huge fan of the stroke. When it comes to a quarterback, when the ball comes out, I think it's natural. I think it's God-given. Either can or can't do it. And I think Brock, man, the ball comes out. It's a clean stroke. He's got plenty of arm. He's got plenty of mobility. Deep ball accuracy is there. He's able to change some speeds. He's able to just throw like a pure thrower. Again, one of the quicker releases that I've seen. And for me, I'm on the table for him as one of those guys currently 4-star bubble. Hopefully he comes out, has a big week, and we can give him that bump. I think he's definitely deserving.
Well, it's going to be an action-packed week in Los Angeles with the Elite 11 coming up, one of the biggest events each and every year. We even had it during the pandemic year 2 years ago down in Nashville. Caleb Williams was the MVP. He will now be starting not far from where you are in Los Angeles for USC. Last year, Cade Klubnik was the MVP. This year, in a year of Arch, in a week of Arch won't be there, but this is the opportunity for other guys to step up. And there's also the opportunity for 3 or 4 guys that have been in that constant conversation with Arch Manning. Dante Moore, Nico Iamaleava, Malachi Nelson, even a Jaden Rashada. Is Arch the number 1 player when it's all said and done? Is he even the number 1 quarterback when it's all said and done? Next week's Elite 11 will go a long way in answering those questions.